Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, thoughts and prayers to Corvallis, Oregon, and Pullman, Washington. Also, what does Kansas State do that Texas Tech would love to emulate under Joey McGuire? And what was Bill Snyder doing pregame that was freaking everybody out on the field? Chris Level will tell us, and we're getting into that and more. Coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Everything runs through Lubbock.
Thanks for joining us once again on Locked On Texas Tech, your team every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Casey Cowan with the only Chris Level, and we appreciate our friends at Bet Online for bringing you this episode. Get there for the latest on this week's trends as we are getting closer to the action this weekend with our friends at Bet Online, where the game starts. Chris, we know the game starts and sometimes can end in the trenches also, but when you're talking about the Kansas State Wildcats, fitting the description of the next potential victim for Joey McGuire and the Red Raiders, you're talking about a team where you truly have to account for all phases of the game. Sometimes broadcasters or fans can swap over sports cliches. Well, both sides of the ball, both ends of the floor. There are multiple sides of a football. It ain't just two. It ain't just offense, defense. We're talking special teams coming up a little bit later in the program because I don't know that anybody does it any better than Kansas State. And kicking her off here, we'll talk about another area where it's maybe not something that's all that much of a threat or that you have to account for week to week. Certainly isn't all that sexy. We're talking about not beating yourselves. Joey McGuire has discussed wanting to be a clean football team, one of the least penalized in the nation as far as the future for his program. And I don't think I'm wrong in saying this week's opponent is certainly one to emulate in that area. Are they not?
Yeah, this has just been kind of, I think, program identity, if you're wearing that purple and silver, is that you just, you don't screw it up. And with that, you don't turn it over and all those things, but you also don't, they always, I think last year, 20th in the country maybe was Kansas State in penalty yardage per game. And I think this year they're around that as well. Just because, it's only about 11 yards fewer per game than Texas Tech is, but this is just not, they typically just don't. And I think that that's their way that they have to be. If that's their recipe for success, they're never going to have the fastest, twitchiest, depth and athleticism and all those things. Now, Deuce Vaughn and Malik Knowles certainly fit that bill. But I think overall they're going to get like the Midwest type of athlete that is bigger and in the trenches and all those things. But it's all about structure and discipline and all that. And with that comes far fewer penalties. And you just can't. You and I both have seen Texas Tech kind of improve upon this as the season has gone along. And I think that is much needed, and it needs to stay that way.
Man, it's taken a long time to chip off anything on the old block as far as self-inflicted wounds are concerned for Texas Tech, whether you want to take the penalty column in general or just other varieties of football follies type situations. They come in a number of manners, and K-State pretty much avoids them all. Texas Tech has almost encountered them all at this point going back over the last decade, Chris. And I think just, again, specifically about the penalty number, and it stands out to me because Joey McGuire has mentioned it several times, specifically in public comments, wanting to be a lightly penalized team. And I think that's always the dream. I don't really know that I've ever rooted for a Texas Tech team that has been lightly penalized. Even going back to my childhood, it always seemed like that Raiders moniker carries over from the National Football League to college. And if there are high school Raiders out there, you're probably heavily penalized as well. Something about the name maybe. But I have thought at the same time, Chris, if the talent level is at a certain point, well, you can probably get over some penalties. I think we saw some of Art Briles' teams do that sometimes because they'd be a pretty heavily penalized team and they're like winning the Big 12 and whatnot. But your kind of margin of error point that you touched on yesterday and you're kind of back to here again today, I think it's something that always has to be a focus for Texas Tech. And really, what team is ever too good, like to turn their nose up at wanting to be clean, disciplined, and one that doesn't shoot all their toes off? But I was going back and looking at some penalty numbers alone because it's one very easy metric to kind of keep track of. And for a simple-minded man like me, that's what I'm looking for. Because I remember Cliff Kingsbury era. Oh, Coach Bro, it's going to be so loosey-goosey. You're going to be so heavily penalized. And I said, dude, did you see Leach's penalty numbers? So I wasn't sure it was going to be a Kingsbury problem, right? And then you get into Wells. Well, Kingsbury, it was a problem, whether it was his issue or just a program problem or whatever. But I was looking back to the first 4 games, going back to Kingsbury. 21, 39, 40, 32 was the number just through the first 4 games. And we're sitting at 27 right now. And feels like what hasn't been a disaster of a start for Joey McGuire, certainly. And you're coming off of your best effort. I'd like to give you a little note on that 21, which is just funny. I think this is back in 2015. 21 through the first 4 games for Cliff's team that year, Chris. 17 alone in the 5th game against Texas Christian. So you go 21-4 and then 17 in the 5th. But you get into the Wells era, cut it down by about 5 on average, and maybe even a little bit better. 22, 27, 28. Joey McGuire right back here at 27. So it's just one way to kind of measure, I guess, the disciplined aspect of a football team. But there's been some slight improvement. I guess I'm really wondering, how far can you go in year one? Like, what's a reasonable expectation this soon?
Yeah, and you forget last year, because I had to go back and look this up to make sure, but I mean, they were 28th in the country. Texas Tech was overall last season, just penalized, I think, 44 yards per game. And so that clearly, I mean, helped them get to a bowl game. It was clearly a reason as to why you were able to win six games and all those things. And yeah, I think it's funny because Mike used to get criticized for, some of those penalty yards way back whenever he was the head coach here. And he would always just he was kind of passive about how, okay, if we got a kid being really too aggressive, I'm not going to get irritated with him. And I think he used to drive people crazy on that. But what happened too often was just like where you just have guys losing their mind and like go commit a personal foul because they're the second one getting caught, stuff like that. Right. But like Joey's got these things written in the football building, and it's just, he talks about it all the time, plan to win. And there's like these eight things that come with it. And one of the top things listed is don't beat yourself. And he's like, you're just not going to win games no matter really at any level of football. If you just keep shooting all those toes off that you got, I mean, you just can't do it. And you that has to be part of your, I don't know, DNA. And I can't say that you're ever going to be like Kansas State, but if that's a steady improvement or you limit a lot of that, because just think about it. I mean, has your defense been good enough around here in the last 10 or 15 years to where if you commit a penalty on a 3rd down where you get a stop and you give a team another 1st down, have you ever been good enough to where like, okay, well, we're going to give them 3 more downs, but we'll get a stop again? No. I mean, it's just not – that's not the game, and that's not the way you're built. The offenses have been too good. So, because I've watched the Dallas Cowboys lately, and they drive me crazy just because it's a yellow flag party all the time and drives me crazy. And they just smile and laugh and giggle. It makes me want to throw my head through a window.
First detached to throw. So that would be some pretty impressive muscle memory there by the rest of the body. And you're an athlete, so I actually think you could pull that off. I don't know. I mean, like many other areas, and I've already described it here this week, I hate how much I envy the identity of Kansas State football, because I think it can be so comparable from a talent standpoint as far as the roster, if not worse off. I mean, you were alluding to that base there, and I mean comparable to what a Texas Tech fan might be able to expect, if not worse off in Kansas versus Texas. I mean, a lot of guys you're getting on a Tech roster are not corn-fed. They're like Mountain Dew and sour straw fed or something. It like just adds an extra gear for some reason. But I think a lot of what they do, and like I said, who's too good for these characteristics, right? I mean, you're probably not successful for the most part if you're not doing things in these areas well. But I think there are clearly years where it has propelled less talented K-State teams to greater heights than probably – were justified just looking at the personnel or looking at the roster. And I'll be damned if it doesn't look like they're going to carry it over into another administration. I mean, talk about all the luck. Good grief. You find somebody. And I think that's why with a search like that, Chris, it's so unique, because you're thinking, okay, Bill Snyder culture, Bill Snyder culture, Bill Snyder culture. I mean, how many guys are there out there that really give you that kind of confidence? And who was drunk enough to believe that the day they interviewed Ron Prince? But Chris Kleiman, I mean, there's a lot of similarities there. Still haven't found a windbreaker in the closet. But beyond that, reminds you a lot of that kind of disciplined, don't beat yourself approach, be good in all phases of the game. Like I said, we'll get to some of the special teams weapons coming up before we're done here on this episode. But Chris, you tell me, you've seen a little bit more Red Raider football than I have. I can stretch it back to Spike's days pretty clearly. Has there been a lightly penalized Red Raider football team or program since you've been taking it in? I mean, do we have to go back to DeWitt Weaver's boys? Or where do we trade?
I mean, it's I think part of it too, and Mike used to talk about this, but part of you running a spread offense most of the time, which you have in the last, 20 plus years, that leads to maybe some more opportunities for penalties because they're easier to see. Because you're out there in one-on-one and you're going to get some receivers that block in the back or this and that because you're so spread out and all those things. I tell you, before I keep going with my penalty thought, I don't want to forget to say what you mentioned, Bill Snyder. One of the most intimidating things I've ever seen from Coach Snyder that he used to do, and I do think it used to freak other coaches out that used to work here, is that when he was in his second tenure, back on the sidelines, every time you would play them in warm-ups, I've never seen another coach do this, but because he was doing it and because of who he is, it literally was just like this mind warp, like, okay, I'm in trouble. Like, what is he writing down? But he would go on your end of the field all by himself with a piece of paper and a pen, and he would watch you warm up. He would sit there by himself very quietly, and he would just write stuff down. And I'm like, somebody go tackle him, man. Somebody go get it. We're giving away all the secrets. He's like picking us apart all by himself right there on that little 3x5 note card.
You've lost the game before you've taken the warm-ups off. Yeah.
And you know what? I swear, I don't think this is really what it was, but it was so intimidating. I mean, because...
But haven't you seen that note card in the College Football Hall of Fame? It's in the glass case. It says, Ricky Ticky Timbo, no Rimbo, Cherry Berry Rucci, Pit Perry Pimbo.
How in the world did you just say
it's
that?
Coach Snyder and I's mantra. We learned it from the same guy, Bob Vila.
Okay.
It's a long story.
Puda Raki wants some seafood mama. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
That's on Chris's card. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But, I mean, and trust me, when you play Kansas State, there's far too often where I'm like, they have this reputation, at least when Bill was there, they have this reputation where, like, okay, they clearly weren't holding there because this is not how Coach Snyder would teach them. So we're not, because I think there was some of that, and I think some of it has worked against you too.
Yes.
In that under Mike, you were kind of renegade and you would really get after the officials. Yeah. I mean, and I mean, Sonny Dykes, when he was on the sidelines here as an OC, he would, just obliterate certain officials verbally. And I thought, this is not helping you. I mean, and I think that carried over for many years. And I think you're slowly starting to kind of get away from that to where it's a new level of official. It's a new level of discipline here. And so I think maybe at times you do get the benefit of the doubt. But I still think Kansas State is still getting the benefit of the doubt too, for sure.
I totally agree on all points stated, and including we have to be making some progress as far as being bros with this new generation of officials. I mean, Coach McGuire was trying to offer one a beer at halftime. It seemed like just 2 or 3 weeks ago, right? And yes. Randy Crystal's now taking his meals through a straw probably. So that's just good news for everybody outside of Austin as far as Big 12 officiating is concerned. Chris, before we get back to a new wrinkle for Texas Tech that, scratch me right where I was itching. And I'll tell you what it is coming up on the other side. We got to tell you about, once again, our friends at Bet Online. It is where the game starts, but it's not too late, even though we're getting close to the end of the week, for you to get in right now and start sharpening up. Sharpen it up. And once again, Chris, I saw this week odds on the hot seats across America for college football head coaches. And unless I'm reading it wrong, Steve Sarkisian's going up the list. So I guess congratulations. You're closer to number one, Coach. At least you're moving up in one standings. Coach Sarkisian, I believe, was maybe now number 3 or number 4 on the list. Chris, how about that? Not much time remaining, possibly.
If they lose to West Virginia, I mean, Austin is going to, I mean, because with Oklahoma staring at you, I mean, you know, yeah. I mean, and I guess you can kind of get some of it back if you turn right around after you lose 2 and beat Oklahoma. But still, it's going to be an interesting next month for old Sark for sure. And the Red Raiders did it to him. You know, Alabama, you know, it's like we're in the moral victories, and we played really well in a loss at home. Yay us. But yeah, the old Red Raiders put old Sark back on the hot seat, or warmed it up for sure.
Oh, it goes down so smooth. Hell, let's run it back. Oh, we can't. Sorry, we've got to move on to a totally different opponent. Maybe next time around, if we see you. Never. Bet Online, the HQ for live betting, stats and scores. You may already know that, but if not, now you do it. It's also the fastest and easiest way to keep track of all your favorite events while you're keeping track of your favorite team on game day. So head to the website or on your mobile device to learn more about what those trends, lines, angles, and action and angles on the action is shaping up to look like as we're close to football with our friends at Bet Online, where the game starts. Good to see you again on Locked On Texas Tech. Your team every day on the Locked On Podcast Network, all across the great state, the U.S. of A, territories included as well, and around the world. Thanks for joining us on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts, and please do subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. We are on a mission to the number 2,000.
Getting close.
We're bearing down, man.
Yeah, that's right.
Can't wait to be there. Comes with a free keychain, I hear, from our friends at YouTube. And I can tell you, I really could use it, man. I'm just all loose keys right now, just scattered all over my pants pockets, Chris. It's an uneasy feeling.
I figure you got 100 keys strapped to the side of your belt right there.
There's no question about it. And there's only one that I know what it goes to. But I'm hanging on to these others in case I come upon that lock I need to open and don't know it yet. I probably have a key to like 6 apartments ago, I bet, if I had to guess.
Yeah, and you probably you lost your $50 deposit on that too, your safety deposit.
Yeah, and I bet I don't have a key currently to the house I live in. That would be about the way that I would roll. But again, not my house, so why would I have a key? It's just an office. I come bum some AC in each day to talk to you fine folks on Locked On Texas Tech. Chris, a new wrinkle for the Red Raiders this year to a degree. Last time out against the University of Texas, I was in favor of solid special teams play. I'm not saying you were perfect, but obviously your field goal kicker, the special teams player of the week in the Big 12 Conference, so that's a good sign. Some solid impact in the return game. And while it's been pretty adventurous so far this season, I thought maybe you turned in your best day in that category last time out, right?
Also on that plan to win, you know, that we talked about with Coach McGuire, it's be special on special teams. And I think that he's been – because every coach has got a different philosophy. I just think that one thing you can always – not 100% of the time, but most of the time, if you're really good on defense as a football team, you're usually really good on special teams, because if you're deeper on defense – most of those guys are filling in a lot of those roles on special teams. And I think each coach comes in and sometimes they say, hey, man, I'm going to limit my starters on special teams. We're just not going to overuse them. But I think Joey and Kenny Perry and the folks that are in charge of special teams, they've said, hey, man, you know, if you're in charge of a special teams unit, you've got carte blanche. You know, you can use as many guys as you need. And they don't try to be dumb about it, but there's a lot of starter type guys that are playing a lot on those coverage units and whatnot. And I think they may have found something with kind of Miles Price and, you know, as maybe a punt returner. I think that they're, again, right there trying not to maybe overuse him. But without Fry being in there, Adrian Fry being out the last couple of weeks, and you know, I think your specialists are really good. I mean, I think maybe Austin McNamara hasn't punted as well as he was wanted to in the last couple of weeks. He's the last guy I'm worried about. You know, I mean, he's going to be just fine. And I think you're right. You mentioned Trey Wolf, but that's also part of you as a team. You're just, again, it's all about margin for error. And that's an aspect of the game that, say, this weekend, you don't have to win it. And it's going to be really tough to win it against Kansas State. Just don't lose it. Just don't get something blocked. Don't give up a return for touchdown, because I'm telling you, man, Kansas State, they've returned, I think, 3 kickoffs against you, or they have 3 returns for a touchdown in the last 5 or 6 years against you. They already have one this year against Missouri. So this is just how these people make a living. And like, it can't break your back. And those statistics will tell you, we talk about analytics. If you give up a return touchdown or a kickoff or punt return, I mean, odds start to slant heavily in your favor of you winning that football game. It's almost as important as like winning the turnover battle and all those things, because it's like gravy points, man. It's free. I'm a big I like brown gravy as well as I do cream gravy too, but I'm also a big au jus guy too. Just for the record, like
au jus?
the drippings in the pan and stuff. However you want to phrase that, that's always good too. Whenever you're getting after it.
Jouar? Au jus? I didn't know if the first time around landed. It's tough to make au jus jokes whenever you're joining each other virtually.
I heard you the first au jus, yeah, like I sneezed. Like,
what the hell is au jus? Is this like poutine?
It's what you dip like a French dip in. It's like the brown like sauce.
Okay.
That you dip the sandwich in. You never had a French dip before?
What they dipped Roger Rabbit in, or tried to. He escaped it, as a matter of fact. I haven't. But
A-U, and then I think it's J, and it's either an O or a U and an S or something.
Au jus here.
Yeah, but it's French.
I did enjoy your public proclamation of equal love for brown and cream gravy.
Yes.
I share that.
Absolutely.
Sometimes,
not on biscuits, but on other stuff. Yeah.
Really everything. I'd put a little on my toothbrush at night just to help me sleep a little better. It just comforts me for some reason. Chris, I think there was a point in time where during the Bill Snyder era, the second one, I thought I remembered K-State being up to like 5 or 6 consecutive games that they had scored a special teams touchdown against Texas Tech. Not all returns, but they're like field goal block, punt block, something like that, whatever, return the other way and taken back for a touchdown. I thought maybe in the early 2000s or at some point there was really a bad stretch for Tech where it was like, man, every time around, forget previewing the offense. It's like special teams and defense coming to town to kick your butt up and down the field. I don't understand necessarily how you implement that type of identity within a program, but I hope also, like we were just talking about, the don't beat yourself aspect of K-State football. I hope that special teams aspect is something that Joey McGuire and the Red Raiders are going to be able to emulate. I mean, I tell you, anything that guys like Bill Snyder and Bill Parcells are fans of, I want to be a fan of as a football fan. And special teams, hidden yardage, and people just think like, oh, Dante Hall, joystick punt returns. No, it's also flipping the field, putting your defense in good situations. I mean, it's the entirety really of the game, and it gets talked about as little as anything, right? Except by those football minds that win a lot.
Yeah, and when you have, that's why, you probably haven't had, since Wes Welker was here and maybe Danny Amendola, you just haven't had like a threat as a returner. Miles Price can be that guy. There's no doubt about that. But I'm telling you, Kansas State's Malik Knowles, I mean, he's a problem. Be careful. I would kick it in the stands. Take it at the 35, man. I mean, or Trey Wolf. Hopefully the Wheaties are on the menu there that Saturday morning in Manhattan, and he just pops it out of the back of the end zone, because you don't want to play with that guy at all.
I thought coming into the year, I just wondered quickly what you thought before we move on. Austin McNamara might be your second best football player individually. I mean, Tyree Wilson, Austin McNamara.
Yeah, well, I will say this: nothing I've seen. Hey, look, he's mishit a few in the last couple of weeks. I'm not worried about it. If we see this for a month later, okay, maybe I'll say. But I've just seen way too much to tell me that that he's just, but Austin McNamara is an NFL guy. I'm just gonna tell you right now.
Yeah, I thought respective to their positions all across the roster, he's on a short list.
Him and Tyree Wilson, that's who you're talking about. Tyree Wilson will be the first, and that's heavy steps, man. That's big time company, but that's
for sure.
That's what you're dealing with. Is, in my opinion, if he's on, he's a weapon. I mean, you're talking about flipping the field and all those things, but he'll get it back going. I mean, he'll be just fine.
If anybody is in Manhattan, Kansas this weekend, if you got a windbreaker, that'd be nice too, and can get to K-State's end of the field with a note card, let's freak them out. Anybody got a side pass and go watch their guys for a little bit. Let's just see if we have an old guy too, somebody that looks really smart, like a doctor or something on the scene.
Just writing stuff down, man.
Here's what we should do. Dress Raider Red up in an old K-State windbreaker and get him down, maybe just take it. You got your hands full, to say the least, and that is because truly all phases of the game are weaponized historically, traditionally, and I think, again, presently by the Kansas State Wildcats. We will step away for a moment from Red Raiders and Wildcats, but sticking around in the Big 12. If you're a diehard college football fan, you may have already felt some of these wins heading in this direction as far as the immediate futures of the Big 12 and the Pac-12. But now seeing it reported nationally and speculated upon further as far as next steps, reconciliation, dissolution, and all things in between, kind of take you aback. We'll get to some things being reported by Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports, One Spot, amongst some others. That's really interesting is these realignment wins continue to blow. We're getting to that dead ahead before we're out of here. Coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, our friends at Jay's Salsa Company, ready for your order. If you are not in Texas or New Mexico, if you are, there's a good chance you can catch them on your local grocery store shelf. United Supermarkets, Albertson Supermarkets, Market Streets, H-E-B in Lubbock, but Texas and New Mexico, otherwise over 90 stores available to find Jay's Salsa. And it's that beautiful red and black jar there on the grocery store shelf. Chris, I love to see it in person. It just gets me excited when I'm at the grocery store, but I hear the thrill of unboxing Jay's Salsa anywhere in the U.S. when you order from jsalsacompany.com is just as exciting. So try it out either way, right?
Been shipping them all over the place, man. I think the people listening have been making the old purchase, and Tennessee's a hot spot, I hear.
Let's go
for Jay's Salsa. Yeah, how about that? But a lot of shipments been going out, so it's been fun to hear about that and people giving that product a try and all that. But jsalsacompany.com.
That's right.
salsacompany.com. But yeah, get Red Raider owned, man. It's a good product. Hot sauce and chips go together all the time. 365. Get after it, man.
Yeah, Red Raider family recipe, 20 years in the making. Tennessee, a Cowan hotspot once upon a time, so no surprise. Great taste there. That's where my forefathers come from. There's Cowans buried in Tennessee, like not recently, like 200 years ago. Maybe recently. I think one had a liver condition last time I checked. I'm not sure. But anyway, shout out to Tennessee, getting 10 a key. And if you're getting 10 a key, save 10 from me, I think is the state motto. Last time I checked in with our friends at Tennessee. Yeah, whether it's in your town, over 90 stores in Texas and New Mexico, as we mentioned, most United Supermarkets, Albertson Supermarkets, Market Streets, or H-E-B. If you are blessed by God to be in Lubbock, Texas, America, or shipping anywhere in the U.S., I even hear we're spurring on local cardboard sales, Chris, boxing all this stuff up to send it all across.
It is. There's been some shipments going out, man. Absolutely. It's been fun. Importer, exporter, man.
That's right.
Yeah, shipping it out. That's right.
Locked On Texas Tech is a local economic stimulant through our friends at Jay's Salsa Company, baby. We're all making it happen. So go ahead and do it today at your local grocery store in Texas or in New Mexico, or online at jsalsacompany.com.
Get you some.
Thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech, your team every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, and Chris, football, of course, on our minds as we're in the heat of this run, but you can never turn a college sports fan away from a morsel of realignment news. And I don't know necessarily that there's news quite yet, but there continues to be, I guess, gathering of this snowball as far as things reported or discussed nationally. This week, some attention turned to a Dennis Dodd article for CBS Sports and seeing some others giving different spins on it as well as it relates to Big 12 television conversations, Pac-12 television conversations, and what this might look like when you're talking about some dust settling. What was standing out to you this week? Because I know we talk about this kind of ad nauseum and follow it that way, so there really has to be something interesting to kind of get our attention at this point in time, but I know it was getting mine, so what was getting yours?
Let's go with our bullet points here. One, this is either a floating the balloon up and letting Notre Dame know, hey, we're moving on. Okay, I mean, because this is all layers here, and I mean it's the truth.
Send some smoke out the chimney or whatever.
That's what I'm saying. And so this is the Big Ten's way of basically saying we're about to take 4 Pac-12 schools, and then, not that they would ever wrap it up, because if Notre Dame was available, they would do it no matter what.
Right.
So that maybe it doesn't even change anything. But it does tell me that maybe Notre Dame is just not going to do this. They're going to be an independent, which is what we thought. It also tells me that I wouldn't want to be Washington State and Oregon State, okay, which we have said from the beginning, okay? But make no mistake, if the Big Ten wants to add whoever it is from the Pac-12, they are saying yes. That is a fact, okay? The money is too great. It's a fact. So if the Big Ten makes this move, then the Pac-12 is done. It doesn't exist. And I think, it's funny because you were kind of talking about, man, you can't ever turn your head, keep it on a swivel because we get more realignment, more realignment talk. But this could, in theory, really get close to wrapping it up at least at the Power 5 level, and we may not even have a Power 5 anymore.
No,
and maybe just 4. But that's what and I think that, Oregon and Washington and then Cal and Stanford are kind of the schools that the Big Ten may be looking at. And that would leave, your Utah and your 2 schools in Arizona and Colorado to join the Big 12, which has long been rumored. And we've tried to split hairs and say, hey, man, I think the Big 12 would be interested if it was just Utah or if it was just Arizona, or if it was just Arizona State. Because, Arizona State right now, not in great shape football-wise. Colorado is certainly not in great shape football-wise. But I think that you if you can add those programs when it's there and available, you do it. And then, not that they're always going to be bad, but it just I think there was 2 things that stuck out, Casey, just to wrap my thoughts up. One is that, again, it does.
I thought you were going bullet points. That was like a Gatling gun.
I know.
I'm loving it all, man. I'm loving it all.
The Big Ten clearly wants to add more. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is it would essentially end the Pac-12. But I think buried in that article, it talks about how the consultants, which this is the consultants that these leagues hire, this is who tells you they're in direct communication with the media partners and the TV partners. And so they're the ones that are telling you, hey, if you add these schools, this is what it's worth. So, and it says in this article, the Big 12 has been told, Adam, if you can add any of these Pac-12 schools or whatever it is, do it. And so this is what's going to happen. But the same consultant is also the consultant for the Big Ten as well. So they're pulling the strings. I found out too about a week and a half ago that Amazon has budgeted $15 billion for content. Okay. $5 billion of that, okay, is earmarked for sports. Okay, programming, sports, but all these things. So I don't know how much that they have used of that $5 billion for their Thursday night NFL games, because they spent, a lot of money on announcers and Herb Street and Al Michaels and all the cameras and all that stuff. However, my point is there's plenty left over to get into college athletics if this is what they want to do. And it's already budgeted and all that, and they can spend whatever they want. I don't think, however, Apple is going to be involved in there. So I want to make sure I say that. And then to wrap it up, it would suck to be Oregon State and Washington State because they're going to go to the Mountain West, according to that article. But this is what we've said all along. It would suck to be those two schools because they're the ones that are going to get left out, maybe Mountain West bound.
Yeah, blame Oregon, blame Washington. Apparently it's beautiful out there. Just enjoy the woods. What can we tell you? What I think is really interesting about Amazon, I've said it before, just going off of what was reported, apparently their offer to the Big Ten was bigger than NBC, CBS, etc. But there's hesitation from the Big Ten, which makes sense to me, college football leadership being what it is, to devote first-tier rights to like a streaming platform. They're concerned about exposure. I do too. I think Amazon will be let back in on the back end for the Big Ten. Here's Rutgers and Indiana. Here's Indiana and Cal and whatever. Never going to see Ohio State. You're never going to see USC, yada, yada, yada. And I wonder eventually if maybe the cash is too difficult to turn down for, say, like the Big 12 or someone else who's not in a Big 10 or SEC position, Chris, to say, we'll give you some first-tier stuff, what we consider first-tier stuff, just because we want to be bold. I don't know. I know one thing. Everything but the networks and ESPN itself, ratings graveyard. You know, I saw NC State and Texas Tech was in like a 750,000 range on ESPN2. I actually thought it was great because even ESPN2, and you may not think it's that big of a deal from ESPN to ESPN2, but the numbers show you will not generate the number regardless of the matchup aside from like 5 blue bloods possibly if you're on ESPN2 versus ESPN. It goes the same and further, obviously, with FS1, ESPNU, yada, yada, yada. So anyway, you can get into those positions on the network channels or ESPN itself. Clearly, you're going to still want to go that route. I don't think there's any way you can say, yeah, let's go stream and let's be innovative and progressive. But yeah, Amazon's going to get in somewhere because they're trying like the devil to do that. They're making F1 bids, which they didn't win out on, throwing money at the Big Ten, which they didn't get in yet, but they're not done.
But they got in with the NFL, and that tells you that that's the king, okay? Yes. So you get in the NFL, get your foot in the door, and if they're wanting to be in the football business, I mean, you know, the NFL was like, sure, let's do it. Because, I mean, the NFL wasn't worried about a streaming partner for a Thursday night game, and all their stuff is prime content, okay? Yep. Any of their games being aired anywhere is big-time stuff. And so I think that the NFL is kind of and Amazon rolled out the red carpet. I mean, it's like a Super Bowl production on these Thursday night games. Right? Yeah, Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit. But it's also, I think they devote 2 Sky cameras and like 25 cameras overall. I mean, it's like they are making these things a big deal. And I just think that this is the tip of the iceberg here from, you know, where this thing may be going from a media rights standpoint. And I can envision if the Big 12, because I think typically, see, the Big 10 has already inked a deal. They've already agreed to this big time deal. It's in that fine print that if they add schools, this is what those schools will get, or they already know all those things. The Big 12 doesn't. The Big 12 doesn't have a new deal. They don't know necessarily what it would look like. But if the consultants are saying, Adam, to me, it's telling me that's more money, and they may know where it's already coming from.
Yeah.
You know, and
we're talking, right? We're already opening up our window. We're talking,
correct,
baby.
Absolutely. and I think there's a direct correlation into what you just said.
100%.
The fact that this is being reported, and the fact that you're already out, you know, and open up negotiations and all that. Now, it may in fact allow Oklahoma and Texas to get out earlier and all that if some of this stuff gets pushed ahead. But bottom line is there's movement, and I think there's money to be made there for what will now be a maybe expanded Big 12.
Look, this hasn't been hard to predict. I really don't think it has, Chris, because all along when the Big Ten comes calling, and they're going to, it's not if, it's when, the others are going to go. Mm-hmm. You'd be a damn fool to settle for any unequal revenue distribution in the same time as far as keeping the Pac-12 together. And I understand maybe there was a thought like the networks would try to usher that as a placeholder or something for now, but you'd be fools as the Four Corner schools to do it if you have another option.
It's a Band-Aid. Yeah, it's a Band-Aid.
Absolutely. We've lived that life, as a matter of fact.
Correct.
It's exactly what David Allan Coe told us one time in his song. It's a fact when a woman starts talking about leave you. It's on the other side of that one. I think the B side. It's a fact when a woman starts talking about leaving and she's standing beside you, she's already gone like the robins. South for the freaking winter. So come on down to Big 12 country for the winter. We're ready for you. It's only a matter of time, Chris, and I'm just excited to see some progress. Before we wrap this up, I do not think if this had played out in a different kind of timeline, you would not have had UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, whoever BYU added if you had these 4 corner opportunities at that time. Do you?
No. You would have added those 4, and then I think I could have envisioned maybe you end up adding a few others if maybe the BYU and the Cincinnati. I'm not sure about Houston or Central Florida, but I think those are the ultimate winners here.
Yeah,
those 4 schools are the ultimate winners, and I think you look really smart by adding them because this is partly why the Pac-12 is so vulnerable because the timing of everything, you were operating in a position of strength this go around, whereas a year ago you were very much vulnerable and kind of weak, and you thought, we're just hoping for a phone call. We don't know what the future is of our league, and the tables have turned, or the turn of tables. Yeah,
I think that's true in part, but I also think that the reality all along has been that Big 12 fans and consumers of these Big 12 products care more than Pac-12 fans, and there has always been outside of USC an unstable foundation. The conference has been decimated. You shot all your bullets. Conference expansion, television network, championship game made you no money. You're geographically isolated. USC's making the same on their 3rd tier rights that Oklahoma State is or whatever. I mean, none of these things were ever tenable. And I guess I just don't want to give Cincinnati or Houston like any credit for helping out the situation. I'm afraid. I'm afraid you were making me feel that way for a second. But I just always feel like the Big 12, if you weren't going to make a panic move, which maybe that was, I don't know, but you had some foundation, even without the Blue Bloods, to no longer be in the upper echelon as far as conferences, but to be the best of the next. And I think you've still got that opportunity. I can't believe that I feel like the Big 12 is on some stable ground, but it just kind of felt that way all along. So, well,
and keep in mind, you add these 4 corner schools, as we've termed them. All of a sudden now you start to dabble in some of those late night windows and TV windows, and then you start talking content, and then that's what's valuable, because if you've got already BYU and because I mean, think about it, you're at this point you're going to be in how many different time zones would you be in? You're in the Eastern time zone, Central, Mountain,
3, I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, and so but that's what, and I think you're the only league that would be able to say that, and that to a TV network, that's pretty valuable because they've got time to fill, and they've got slots to fill, and they've got different nights to fill it on, whether it's a Friday night, Saturday night, or whatever. And I'm kind of fascinated to see how this thing plays out and what you come up with.
Yeah, and I don't know what time zone Arizona gets us because they don't play around the same time games, right? So I don't know.
Daylight savings is not,
where y'all at?
Yeah, they don't salute to that holiday or that time frame. No.
It's another dimension. That's how good this is going to be. We're getting the mountain time zone and then an extra time zone dimension courtesy of the state of Arizona. Appreciate you, Arizona. All right, there's a whole lot to process there. And again, just still in the midst of this train rolling down the tracks, but kind of another checkpoint that I think you have crossed as you see these things now reported in a much more substantial or public way. So we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll be back at it coming up tomorrow with plenty more on Tech and K-State as the Red Raiders hit the road now for 2 consecutive. Make sure you're making Locked On Big 12 your second listen after Locked On Texas Tech with Josh Neighbors right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And subscribe on YouTube to Locked On Texas Tech if you haven't yet, or anywhere you get your podcast. Enjoyed it as always, Chris. We'll catch you on the other side.
Yes, sir. Keep hope alive, people.
You got it. Premiering 7 a.m. Central Standard Time, the Lord's time. Tomorrow on YouTube, if you're getting down like that, Coffee and Cowan. We're printing the shirts, baby. Thank you to whoever said that. I'll get you a cut. We'll see you then on the Locked On Podcast Network on Locked On Texas Tech.